and something that has kept humans together and safe and whole since the beginning of human history. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Anthony, director, actor, and cinematographer. And today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind recently. So I was watching a podcast recently with a bunch of directors in Hollywood, pretty big names. And they started talking about if they were the last person on Earth, would they make movies still? And this question kind of stemmed from other hypotheticals around, well, do we make films for ourselves or do we make them for an audience to view? And that's where this question came from of, if I was the last man on Earth, would I still make movies? And this got me thinking about why we create in the first place and why we make movies and why we spend so much time putting all of our energy into it. And so I wanted to kind of unpack that a little bit and talk about, if I was the last man on Earth, would I still make movies and would I still create? So let's get into it. Now, this question is pretty jarring when you start to think about it on the surface, right? If I was the last person on Earth and there was no one else around, what would I do? Would I still try to create these films? Would I still post them anywhere? Would I watch them if it's just me? And this got me thinking about, do we really create for an audience or do we really create for ourselves? And for the longest time, I have always said that I try to create things for myself, right? I don't try to write a short film for an audience that I think they're going to like. I don't try to make things that I think other people are going to like. I really try to make things that I like. And if it's a film, I'll try to make a short film that I know that I would want to watch rather than trying to pander to an audience. But this question kind of got me thinking, right? Well, let's take the audience out of the equation. If there is no audience at all, then would you still make it? Would you still put in all of your energy and time into making this film? And on the surface, when I think about that, I really do think the answer is yes, with a caveat. I think that a lot of the reason why we create and why we tend to make movies or we tend to write plays, songs, pieces of art, whatever it is, I think a big part of that is to create community, right? For filmmaking specifically, I know that part of the reason that I will make a short film or put something out is because I am feeling a certain type of way. And I understand that other people are probably feeling that way as well. And so by creating this film and putting it out there, I can either help someone process what they're feeling or at the very least give them a 10-minute escape from whatever's happening in their life at that moment. And so for me, that's where I find a lot of joy in filmmaking and creating art in general. And so that kind of leads us back to this question, right? Well, if there is no one to create this community with, if there are no other people, it's just you, would you still do it? Would you still create a film? Would you dance? Would you make paintings? Would you do all these things? And at the end of the day, I think there is something to be said about having community with yourself, right? What do I mean by that? Well, it's important to work through things emotionally and mentally. And if you are in that situation, which I hope you never are, of being the last person on Earth, then I think it would be important to kind of still create things, right? To make things, to make films, to make a painting, whatever it is, just to process your emotional state and to process the things that are going on, whether or not you're making it for someone else as a audience. And I think the question posed is interesting because the answer is kind of yes and no, right? If you think about it, should we create things for an audience? The answer, I think, is no, right? If I create something with the intent of, I'm going to make this for an audience, I'm going to make it so someone will watch it and will like it, 9 times out of 10, what I've noticed is that kind of falls flat on its face, right? You're never going to please everyone. So there's that. But also the audience has this kind of radar inside that they can feel that. They can feel that this was created not for the sake of art, but created for the sake of just making content or making something to put out there. And you can tell when a movie was written to be written, right? A lot of these movies that I see on Netflix nowadays, you can tell like some studio exec put into ChatGPT, what's the trending topic right now? And it spit out a topic and they wrote a film on it. And so all of this to say is when you ask that question of would you create for an audience or are you creating for yourself, I still believe that we do create for ourselves, and that makes the best work. We make movies that we would want to see and that are authentic and true to the experiences and to the feelings that we have. All of that to say, a big part of it is to create films for an audience. There's a difference, right? If I'm creating it for an audience, I'm creating it for them to find this sense of community, to see something on a screen or on stage or in a painting that they can relate to and that they can say, wow, there's someone else experiencing this that I'm going through. How do they deal with it? What do they do? It creates this emotion, right? And it creates something inside of you that makes you feel connected to other people in the world, makes you feel connected to other people in the human race. And so if the purpose of creating this art is to feel connected, if that's what we mean when we say we're creating for an audience, then I think that you still should create art if you're the last person on earth, if it's a film or a book or a painting or whatever, so that you can still feel that connection to the human race, which is you, right? And so this is something that's been on my mind recently, especially with kind of the state of the creative space right now. You know, we've got AI is starting to come in and people are able to make these amazing videos and photos using AI. And we're able to kind of get the things in our head onto paper, onto the screen faster because of this. And it begs the question of, is it going to get to a place where this kind of stuff is being created and we're going to slowly move away from art more into content, right? And so what's the difference? You may be asking, what is the difference between art and content? And this is just my hot take on it. I personally believe that art evokes a feeling. Art evokes something inside of you that draws you closer to the human experience and makes you feel that sense of community and all this kind of things. Whereas content is something that you watch and it just kind of fills you with nothing, right? And I think that even though it may be funny, it may give you a little laugh and you keep scrolling, whatever it is, there's just something innately different about watching a piece of content versus watching a film that actually moves you and makes you feel something, right? I don't think I've ever cried over a TikTok. I don't think I've ever sat and thought about the human experience over an Instagram reel. But I have had those emotions and those thought processes when watching a film, when looking at an art piece in a museum, when listening to a song, right? There's something about those mediums and those things that we really pour our souls into that are different than content. And so that's where I kind of separate art versus content. And it's a tricky subject because nowadays there is so much content and art out in the world and easily accessible to you at the snap of a finger. You can find it. And it's getting to a point where we're so saturated with all of these things happening that we forget to see the forest for the trees and take a minute to just stop and appreciate the true works of art. And I think as we continue down this road, we're going to start to see a renaissance almost going back to these things, right? Because there is going to be, you can try to stop it, but it's going to happen because there's going to be so much AI generated content out there and things that are just pumped out and created. I think we're going to get to a place where we're burnt out on that. And we really are going to go back to wanting to see raw and real things. And that's going to be a beautiful transition back to the human experience and that connection. And so all of this to go back to the point of, would you still create art and would you still create films if you're the last person on earth? And I hope that the answer is yes, because at the end of the day, whether you're the last person on earth or part of a group of the last people on earth, building that community and creating that connection with other human beings is so important to our existence. Right? It's the oldest art form, which is storytelling. And if you boil all of these things down, whether it's a painting or a piece of music or a film, all of it boils down to storytelling. And storytelling has been the oldest art form and something that has kept humans together and safe and whole since the beginning of human history. And so Why would that stop if you're the last human on Earth? Humans thrive off of this feeling of community. And as long as there is one human on Earth, then that community has a duty to continue on. And so that's kind of where I landed on and this kind of hypothetical thought. Let me know down in the comments down below, if you were the last person on Earth, would you still create things, or would you just kind of sit in the nothingness and exist? So if you like this kind of comment, make sure to like and subscribe down below and click that bell icon so you stay notified. And as always, my name is Anthony. Go out there and make something cool. I dare you.